In this short video, I'm going to talk a bit about green design and things we should consider. So this is a quick and simple life cycle analysis. So this bit here is where we think about getting the resources. You might think of it as pre-production. So that's getting the materials ready to be used. Then once we have the materials ready to be used, this whole production stage, and then we distribute them, then we use them, utilising, and then we dispose of them. So that's a life cycle analysis. So if we think sensibly, how could we make this make products more environmentally friendly? We can use this analysis very quickly and simply. So like material production, if we had less material, like fewer materials, part of dematerialisation, there'd be less of this, so that would be smaller. So there'd be less pollution caused at this stage. You could also perhaps use materials that are easier to produce, easier to manufacture. Okay, so maybe this is used to recycle things, I'm not sure. Then there's this bit here, this transport. So transporting between the manufactured materials and a manufactured object. If these were closer together, reducing this transport, that would make a huge difference. Normally this isn't the case. You might have things where maybe you might have the materials produced. Imagine you're making a car. You might produce the materials in Russia, ship the steel from Russia across to maybe Newcastle to manufacture the cars. Okay, so a massive transport here as opposed to getting that material locally. And then even some of those parts to make those cars, they might be produced elsewhere. So we've got a really big transport issue here and lots of pollution towards manufacturing. Which is why lots of people prefer to make locally, make where the resources are, so it can be better. And then when you manufacture it, this transport and distribution to being used. Okay, this transport also, consider that as like packaging. How do we package these products? Too much packaging, it's obviously bad for the environment, so cutting down the manufacturing, cutting down the packaging, or making that packaging so it's easier to dispose of. And maybe even making where you're selling it. So instead of, imagine, let's go back to our cars, some of our cars made in Japan. Instead of making them in Japan or making them in America, or making, shipping them a long way, or making them in England and then shipping them to America, making it locally, perhaps the better way forward to cut down this pollution on transport. Then when we use them, all these things to think about. How is it used? Is it something we need to charge constantly? Is it something that uses lots of fuel? Anything like that. So we have to think about how we use it. And then disposal is something we need to obviously think about. How are they disposed of? And that's something we're going to look into a bit more. So that's our life cycle analysis and roughly how we can reduce waste. Now imagine if we change that. So that is a cradle to grave situation, because we're starting here, finishing here, so disposal. That's cradle to grave. There's another approach which is slightly different, which is cradle to cradle, and that is it's got the same analysis. Same. Okay, so we get our materials and we manufacture it, we use it, we get our product ready and we use it. Then at the end of the product's use, that's where it either gets returned or disassembled. Okay, and then we use that disassembly to make a new one. So we go round. So this is going round and round. And imagine something like iPhones. Apple have got this type. It's obviously very important to Apple, and it's a big marketing thing for them. And they obviously don't want to waste resources if they don't need to. And what they're doing is they have this robot. I think the current one's called Daisy, taken over from the older one called Liam, and they obviously like their names. And what this does is it gets your iPhones, and it can disassemble them. It can take away all the useful nutrients, or useful bits of those phones, and go round again. So it can take apart your phones, which is done by machines. So it's much quicker and much simpler, and it saves wastage. And those parts can get used again. So they're working on this whole cradle to cradle principle, and that's the principle of using it again and again. And so that's how we use stuff. But there's this other one. So okay, there's a biological cycle we can use. So this time, imagine we're making something out of plant-based things. We can grow it, we can produce it, we can have our product, we can use it. And at the end of its use, maybe it gets biodegraded, and that biodegrading, gets nutrients go back into the earth, and then from that we can grow more. So it goes around. So it's a different type of cycle. And I was looking around and I came across this product, and this is used both of them. So this very simple design here, this very simple bottle, cleaning product, and what it does is it's the only product I've ever come across where it talks about cradle to cradle. And the idea is the outside of it, the plastic, goes through this. Okay, it's made from recycled stuff, made from recycled plastic, and it's used, and at the end of its life it gets recycled and it gets used again to make a new one. Whereas the inside, it's biodegradable. So the inside goes around this principle. Okay, so it doesn't need to just follow the technical cycle, the technical cradle to cradle. It can follow the biological cycle, cradle to cradle. And it could, like this one, do both, a bit of each. Okay, so there are things to consider. And obviously we can reduce, by reducing the amount of materials, by dematerialisation. It's better by reducing the steps. Again, even better with these ones. So if we reduce the steps, we reduce the materials, maybe we reduce those distances, how far things have to travel. And thinking about this use business, everything gets used. If we reduce the energy something uses when we're using the product, if it's more efficient, then it's clearly better. And that's something for us to consider during green design. Okay, and something that's also very important is for this to work, is this disassembly. Sometimes products need to be designed for disassembly. It's no good having an amazing product and think, yeah, I'm going to recycle this, and then it's too hard to recycle. Okay, Apple had to make that robot Daisy to disassemble their products. Not everything is easy to disassemble. And lots of stuff is hard to fix. It's been designed so it's a sealed component and we can't fix it. And it's got to be designed for disassembly for this to work properly. Okay, so that's a key thing to consider. It's a product designed for disassembly, and it's a product designed for cradle to cradle. Okay, which is much better than using the traditional cradle to grave technique, okay, where it ends up here either recycling or even landfill, which is obviously not good for anything. I hope that's a brief introduction to green design and the life cycle analysis.